So we are there. We are in our final session of the forum, and we are going to be looking at new technology. I think Anush set it up really well in the last panel, started us thinking. Everything from generative AI to the future of live performance, and then a panel kind of bringing all of that together. Fantastic. So let's get going. And I will invite Guy Gadney to the stage, who is the founder and CEO of Charismatic AI and has probably the best titled session, which is Wonder Panic, Creativity and Generative AI. Guy, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Dobar dan. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you had a good coffee break. My name is Guy Gadney. I'm CEO and founder of Charismatic AI. And I want to give a quick sort of landscape of where we see the world and the work we're doing at the moment. Because apparently AI is quite important right now. And if I want to get an idea of who thinks it's important, probably he thinks it's quite important, who's our Prime Minister and wants to turn the UK into a great AI superpower. However, there are some downsides to this. Some people don't like it quite so much and says that Sir Elton John says he's very angry over these AI plans. But to give a bit of context of what's going on, it's important, I think, to go back a little bit and show what's going on with audiences and where the audiences are. So if we look at the moment of the difference between how many broadcasters and production companies are making video per hour, per year, it's about 15,000 hours of corporate video. Up into the creator video in the creator economy, YouTube only, this is up to 250 million hours. So there's a huge shift that has already happened at this point. And interestingly, when you then look at the viewing hours, and this is UK across 4 screens, so it includes computers and mobile phones, and is for audiences between the ages of 16 and 34. So this is not just the kids or just not older generations, it's that middle piece. YouTube absolutely dominates. And I think, again, this is not a projection. So already the biggest challenge in marketing, as we know, is to change audience behavior. And this has already changed. And importantly, when we look at total TV usage, I promise this is not all stats, but it's quite useful to see. Between April 2022 and November last year, so quite current, the big thick line at the top is YouTube. The next one down is Netflix. So it's not just that this has happened, but it is accelerating. We're seeing more content onto these new digital platforms. The other interesting thing to put into this mix then is that it's not just about watching quality content. It's not watching, high-end movies or dramas. This is changing the way in which these demographics look at quality, because what they're doing is that they're finding that they have more of a connection, sort of almost like a personal, emotional connection to social media creators. We talked about influencers before, but that terminology is changing now more into these creators for these channels than to TV personalities or actors. So there is not only a change in the platforms they're on, but there is a change in the way that these audiences are consuming content. And then here comes AI. So all of that I spoke about was before AI, and now here comes AI. And you can look at AI as being either the knight on a white charger coming in to save the creative industries, or one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Somewhere in between is where the reality lies. So if we look at how AI is being used and can be used, yes, there is potential to reduce cost, make the cost of production cheaper. This will result in more risk, more experimentation on the good side. It also impacts the changing of jobs that we've talked about before. To me, one of the most interesting things is the second one, real-time rendering. The idea that we can create a really small gap, almost a gap of seconds, between the idea of a piece of content or a story out into what the final version is. And think a bit like 3D games have already set the foundations for this. And then the bit I love is things like being unconstrained by physics, doing impossible shots. Hamsters coming out of people's brains seems to be quite a sort of popular one on TikTok at the moment. But exploring alternate realities, arguably you couldn't have made movies of the Marvel franchise or indeed Harry Potter without VFX or CGI. It would have been unbelievable. So what new IP can we generate with AI as a background? So our view is that this disruption could happen really fast. And it's because it's being put into the hands of creators in a really broad way. The access to things like ChatGPT is a lot broader than it was to Adobe, which was a lot broader than traditional edit suites in the past. So we're seeing that this is something that is not only, the audience has shifted, but AI is impacting more. And one of the key things it's changing is the relationship between a creator and the audience. So traditionally, you'd have the broadcasters and Netflix and commissioners in the middle, and that would be or publishers, that's the sort of gateway. But now the creator is the gateway, the enabling tools or the platforms directly into the consumer. So this is a fundamental shift and could actually come to fix the problem around getting money into creators' hands, which is, again, a legacy issue that goes back possibly hundreds of years. So what are we doing? We've just come back, we've just finished a year's project looking at the concept of story itself and the relationship between AI, generative AI, and story. And we recognized that this was going to be really controversial, but also that it needs development, it needs thought, it needs research. And that research should come from within the creative industries, not from a tech startup out in the Bay Area with a lot of VC funding. So that's what we did. We worked with Channel 4 in the UK and Aardman Animations, 4-time Oscar winners of Wallace and Gromit fame, and built up a platform that was looking at how far we could take it. So this is a quick introduction to what we have built, where, and I'll talk over this a little bit, where a writer, a creator, could come up with the idea for a kitchen murder mystery, for example. And then what Charismatic platform does is it creates the first stage of those of that story. So putting in black and white imagery, almost like doing an animated storyboard of each project before connecting out into generative video. Critically, creators can edit. So if they want to change the location here from San Francisco to Los Angeles, then they can, and they can change the details of it, the characters. So you're exploring the creative vision early on and then running it again and then again and again. So we're seeing this as a sort of co-writer, almost like a writer's room for the writer, and creating these, simple animations, deliberately simple. We didn't want to go down the design side, and when they're happy with it, then we can send those out into the generative video systems that you've heard of, like this example.
Jack, this is taking too long. What if he's hurt himself in there or something?
Relax, Luca. We'd have heard him through the door. I don't think he's in there at all.
I'm reopening the Marcus Cole case, and I'm going to need your help to crack it. We don't have much time as the boss wants answers. Something doesn't feel right about this, so be careful.
I found Grigory Volkov's name in Henrik's logs. That ghost has haunted Interpol files since the Cold War.
So either your intel was wrong, or we're dealing with resurrectionists.
We need to split up.
I've got the autopsy report, and that's odd. The report citing drugs in Danny's system was signed by Miss Blackthorne. Why's the funeral home lady popping up in a murder cover-up?
And from anime, also tying into the new photoreal models like this one. This is using Google's model.
I'm low on food, low on water, and it's so bloody cold.
So, and those are, by the way, just in case you're wondering, all AI characters. So that's just, there are no characters in that. So these are sort of big movements that are happening in the industry at the moment. Our view is that we need to solve for what's coming, and it is coming if it's not already here. We're working with the UK government, with a lot of the creative industries, to look at how we may underpin the work we're doing here with financial models that may be blockchain enabled. But my sense is that this is now in a position where we can generate stories and enable a new generation of people who may not have had access to the education or technology that they have done previously. So just on a local basis, if you take a photo of this, it's best viewed on a laptop, but you see the black and white comic book. Just specially for today, we created Love Story in Podgorica, which is the capital city of Montenegro, as you should know. And you can experience this when you get home tonight. So a lot to talk about. We're super involved in everything, in all of the different research and development. We're keen to bring creators up with us and give a bit of more of a creative response to the technology that has been done to date. So thank you very much. I'll be around all afternoon and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy. I imagine we might need more than 10 minutes to delve into some of that, but Guy will be with us tomorrow as well, and there'll be much more chance to speak to him. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Alicia Tkach, who is a partner at Stewfish, who is going to be talking about designing the future of live performance. Alicia.
Hi, my name is Alicia Tkach, and I'm a partner and architect at Stewfish Entertainment Architects. Firstly, thank you for the invitation to be here and giving me the opportunity to show you some of the work we do at Stewfish and share insights of our experience in designing culturally significant and groundbreaking events. In a nutshell, we design unique and innovative entertainment architecture to create inspirational memories and experiences for a global audience. Our portfolio of work covers a huge range of projects spanning many different genres, typologies, as well as countries and continents, from live one-off shows to permanent and semi-permanent buildings and structures. Stewfish is where entertainment and architecture meet, and hopefully magic happens. We cover 14 radials in our portfolio of services, touching from extra large to extra small, from ABBA to the Zayed Foundation. We've worked with our clients collaboratively and repeatedly over decades, and always strive towards long-term and trusting collaborations. So the studio started with Mark Fisher in 1977, who was working with Pink Floyd and designed inflatables for their Animals tour. His vision was to merge the diligence of the architecture profession with this newly formed world of entertainment and touring shows. Working with the likes of the Rolling Stones and U2 over the next few decades allowed us to become world-renowned stage architects for some of the most iconic and spectacular touring shows. Jumping forwards to 2008, designing the Beijing Olympics opening and closing ceremonies was quite a pivotal moment for the studio. And the success of the ceremonies propelled us into a Chinese market, giving us the chance to take a next step into actually designing the venues that the shows would be housed in. So the Hanshow Theatre was designed to be a state-of-the-art landmark building in Wuhan, in China, part of the new cultural district. The client wanted a very kind of high-tech, innovative building, and they really wanted it to stand apart from the dense urban fabric surrounding it. Resembling a huge red lantern, the external facade was covered with 18,000 red aluminium discs, and each disc had LED nodes in the center, which meant we could run low-resolution content through the facade at night. The internal auditorium is on a grand scale, featuring transformable seats that reveal a massive 10 million litre swimming pool during the show, and the world's largest movable LED screens at the time. It transforms during the show from a proscenium arrangement theatre into a thrust stage configuration. So the upper seats actually move down 6 meters during the show with the audience on, and the lower seats swing around to create this performance pool. This very complex and highly ambitious project required perfect coordination between the show design and the building design. So it's a great example of the holistic and innovative entertainment architecture. Staying in China, the next project was the Dai Show Theatre in southern China, which in comparison was a lot more low-tech, but it was a similar brief in the sense that the client wanted to use this cultural building to kind of be a landmark feature within a wider development. Similarly, we designed the building from the inside out, making sure that the building responded to the needs of the show. This is a 1,200-seat auditorium and has the same tricks as the other one in terms of water effects, and the stage actually lowers down during the show to reveal an 8-meter deep swimming pool. Conceptually, the idea was that we would use the structure of the architecture to create a backdrop for the show, so the building and the show were completely holistic. It was important to the client that the show itself was culturally appropriate for the Chinese market, and they didn't want a Western show being kind of plugged into the theatre. Externally, the theatre roof canopy is supported by these kind of tree-like columns, and the roof canopy split into 2 tiers with air gaps in between, which provided an open air and naturally ventilated lobby, which was perfect for the tropical climate. So moving forwards again, last year we worked on Adele's residency in Munich, and it's a really good example of creating a groundbreaking event in a location where there's not really the infrastructure to house it. So instead of going into an existing stadium, the concept was to build a pop-up stadium for 80,000 people on the exhibition grounds, which were just outside of Munich city centre. So there was an extended Adele world, which incorporated hospitality, merchandise, immersive experiences, and a Ferris wheel. And the out-of-town location is normally used as an exhibition area for trade shows and expos, but it's very well served with transport links. And it actually, I think it's the largest temporary arena that's ever been built. So playing 10 shows only over 4 weeks, the entire structure took 2 months to construct and a month to disassemble, with most of the parts being formed from rental stock so we could put it back into the companies for future use. And we had a massive 220-meter LED screen at the back, which was certified by Guinness World Record as the largest continuous outdoor temporary LED screen. The show attracted over 730,000 fans, and it was a major economic boost to the city, generating an estimated 490 million in revenue thanks to hospitality revenues and the rent that they got from using the grounds. And this groundbreaking show really flipped the concept of an artist touring and going out to people to actually people coming to the artist and the artist staying in one place. So finally, this brings us to the ABBA Arena and the phenomenally successful show it's housing, ABBA Voyage. Creating a new form of entertainment, it's mixing virtual and physical realities within a 21st century digital ecosystem. To date, it's the most advanced example of entertainment architecture that explores the otherworldly potential of developments in experiential and digital technology. But really, it's putting the audience experience back into the center of this process. So the site, Pudding Mill Lane, is part of the Olympic Park in East London, and it's part of the legacy development. It's got excellent transport links from the centre of London, which was important to make sure we can get people to the venue. It's a brownfield site owned by the legacy development, and eventually it will be used for residential use, but ABBA hopefully will stay there for a bit longer. So the auditorium is for 3,000 people. And again, like the other projects, we very much designed it from the inside out. And this particularly needed to be like that because it was housing a very specific show. In essence, the structure encloses and forms the show whilst making the boundary between the real and the virtual permeable. And hopefully it's impossible for the audience to understand where the show ends and where the building begins. At the core of the experience lies an infusion of art and technology that's designed to manipulate audiences' senses and perceptions. The ABBA avatars are the brainchild of a team of legendary musicians, creators, producers, and directors. So ABBA's Benny and Bjorn, as well as Bailey Walsh, Svanna Giesler, and Ludwig Andersson, were in charge of taking ABBA's music and infusing it with the digital magic from ILM. Stu Fish began developing the physical part of the puzzle right from the beginning, because the digital and the physical had to meet to create this sweet spot. And the seating layout was crucial to get the right sight lines. Externally, the slatted exterior was the most efficient way of doing this was to cover it with thin slats of timber. And the whole building is designed to be disassembled and relocated elsewhere. And at the moment, it's just sitting on top of the car park with very minimal ground interventions. While the arena itself are fixed, the surrounding areas of the front of house and back of house need to remain flexible for future sites. And then we have two entrance tunnels, which form part of the overall experience, acting as a threshold between the physical world of East London and then the digital world of ABBA. ABBA Voyage belongs to a new generation of touring shows, combining mixed reality with physical audience interaction within a very physical and virtual structure of show and building. That structure includes the technology that enables audience immersion in a show whose content is otherworldly. As we evaluate our experience and learnings from the success of the show, it is clear that we're moving towards a future where we will definitely be mixing virtual and live audiences and performers. And as entertainment architects, we do believe that people will always want to gather and share a communal experience of being entertained. And although technology is helping us push shows into places we could only have dreamt of 5 or 10 years ago, it's not capable of replicating that fully immersive central experience of a live concert, where the performance is enhanced by the overall environment and context. It really is that sheer physicality of live shows and festivals like Woodstock or Coachella, and the fact you're sharing it with other people that helps make these experiences memorable. Reality and virtuality are increasingly no longer two separate entities. And with the rapid growth of technology in the fields of AI or augmented and virtual reality, the question, what is real, is going to be harder to answer. We are, however, as always, very excited to be part of the next challenge that will constantly push our innovation in new directions. And it's a real privilege to be exploring and shaping the live performance spaces of tomorrow. And we're very excited about what might happen next. Thank you so much.
Wow, Alicia, thank you. Such incredible work. I'm going to invite you to stay on the stage and join the next panel and bring the rest of the panelists up. So we'll be joined or chaired by Andrew Chitty, who spoke earlier, as well as Declan Keeney, and joined for the first time by Ben Morris, who is the creative director of Industrial Light and Magic. Come on up.
Thanks for that, Alicia. That was a lot to take. That was a lot to take in, but I'm sure incredibly stimulating for everybody. So we're going to try and tag on to that, and also wrap in some of the other mentions of technology that people have made throughout the day. But for you three, this panel's job is to delve down into some of those technologies, but not lose people on the way. So, because you're all creative, really, not trained in not originally kind of trained as software engineers or VR or in any of those things, which is an amazing thing. And I suppose the other thing I would say, I always say this to my students, is this idea that creativity and technology are intimately intertwined is not a new thing. Creativity and technologies have always been intertwined. You know, Greek theatres, if you look at the design of Greek theatres, they've got acoustic devices, they've got stage devices, they've got technology in them. The same is true of Elizabethan theatres, you know, and that technology, how the stage is arranged, influences the content. If you look at television, you know, I used to work in television, and television is at least as much a technology as it is a creative medium, and even painting, you know, sort of. So not just pigments and paints, but it's been a technology since the first cave dweller blew dust onto the side of a cave wall and left a handprint. So this idea that this is, I think that it's more useful to think of this as just another evolution rather than something kind of radically new. But what we have got is maybe, as people through the day have mentioned different technologies, they've mentioned them as different technologies, and you three are all working in a space where these have converged. So perhaps I think what Alicia kind of gave us was there's a new way that these technologies have escaped the studio as well. So perhaps that's something we can dwell into. But since Declan was on earlier, and Lisa's just needs a few minutes to kind of gather from that, Ben, can we start with you? Because obviously, you know, you as creative director of, you know, ILM in London, you're known for doing, you know, amazing work. But how did we get here from where I guess you started, which was in very different form of special effects, and then GFX and CGI and
yeah. For me personally, I started off. I knew what I wanted to do from about 7 years old. I went and saw a film called Star Wars, and I just walked out and said to my mum, "That's it. How do I do that?" So that was easy. The hard bit in those days was actually trying to work out. I went through all the magazines and all the making of books, and I just was like a sponge. And I used to make models and do all sorts of things. So trying to work out how to get into the industry in those days, there were no courses at universities, there were no trainings. It was very much an apprentice-based process. So I was very lucky, and I just got a few tickets to see a presentation by Jim Henson's Creature Shop, who were the Muppet makers in London. And I was the kid at the end of the show, or the presentation, who came up and said, "Can you give me a job?" And I was only 15, and they kind of said, "Yeah, we can't give you a job now because it's not right, but we'll show you how to do it." And from then, they were wonderful. So I got in, and I worked on the Muppet Christmas Carol, making miniature Dickensian London.
Something we'd all like to have on our CV.
Yeah.
One of the greatest films ever made.
So, and I learned how to stick things together with super glue and bash around in a workshop, and then stayed there, joined their R&D department, and made a number of films. There was the Talking Pig film, Babe 1, and then Babe 2, a group of us left. And in the process of leaving, I started to look with my boss at the companies in London who were capable of computer graphics, because we knew we'd need that. And so midway through Babe 2, I actually went and saw Jurassic Park 2, and I just sat there, having built robots and animatronics for 5-6 years. I just knew that we'd never get the movement that I could see in this new world. And that was right at an inflection between sort of techniques, and I think we're right there again. But for me, it was practical reality with can you achieve the same thing with digital? And so I basically retrained, and I left and started right at the bottom rung, went into Mill Film and made a number of films there, and retrained all the way through computer graphics, and then finally stayed at Framestore for a number of years, and then worked with Steven Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy on a few shows, and very luckily, Kathy gave me a call and said, "Do you want to set up ILM London? We're going to come back and start making Star Wars films again." And I actually tried to stall her and said, I need to think about this. And my wife just was going, "Just say yes." So anyway, I did, and it's wonderful. So I've been running the studio with a woman called Sue Lister, who couldn't be here today. And we've got about 700 artists in London. So that's all about me. We can talk about
No, but I think that's a fascinating story that you started with. You know, the world as you came into it was one of physical models.
Yeah, 100%.
And then computer generated, and now live and real time.
Yeah.
Models and and digital humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a story of like I think a lot of people in this world. It's a story of kind of personal creative kind of journey, but also a story of evolving technology.
Yeah. And I would say back at the Creature Shop, I mean, The Dark Crystal is one of my favorite films. Jim made it in Labyrinth. There was technology in there. It was just made out of pieces of wood and rubber bands and other things, and then it slowly got better and better, and aluminium was introduced. And so technology's always been there. And I've never looked at my job as technical or creative. It's just the whole lot together. You're trying to tell a story visually, and we'll use anything that we can get our hands on.
But you described it that you think that we're an inflection point again in the film world.
Yeah.
In comparison to, say, the early CGI kind of breakthroughs.
Yeah.
So what I want to understand, and I don't like to chair things asking people one thing at a time, so feel free to butt in now, guys, so there's almost like a stack of these technologies that seem to be, so what are they, and what do they enable you to do, or change the working practice, or enable you to make new things? Who wants to have a go at that?
For Stewfish, we see technology as a tool. Like, we don't say, oh, how do we fit this technology into a project? It's more about what do we need from the project, and then how can we misuse technology to get where we need to be. And I think that's always...
It's a toolbox. Somebody walks in the door and asks you, can you do something that's never been seen before? And you open the toolbox and go, oh, we haven't got that thing that we need to do this. But we've got all the other bits.
Right, so the toolbox has got bigger, but it's still, the state of the art still advances through projects.
Yeah, every time.
For me, looking at films, one of the seminal moments for me in my life was Space Odyssey, Kubrick's film, and that I became really fascinated by this idea. People talked about the design in the film and design in film. Until that moment, I didn't really make those connections. And then I look at back projection. So the first award, one of the major awards for back projection, is 1929. This has been around. So these are not new technologies in some respects. These are iterations and developments from pipelines that Ben and others have been involved in for many, many years. But then I got very fascinated by this idea that a lot of the film was shot on sound stages. So, you look at even Space Odyssey with the very start of the film, where we have, it was shot in the south of England, looks like Nebraska or looks like Nevada, a desert or something like that. And so, to Ben's point, when the work that Stagecraft started to do was starting to converge a lot of things that I was involved in, so XR, VR, game engine technology, that convergence, that bringing together of the cinematic, of immersive, of computer games technology really excited me because what it was doing was it was bringing closer this gap between our imagination and execution. There was a world there where you couldn't. Now we're sitting at this place where I think Ben's referring to, if I understand him, is we're back at that place where we're able to bring our imaginations to life in a way that's brand new. It's in some respects it's easier to connect and build, and world building for me is a fascination. World building around stories, world building around film, world building around every project has a world that we occupy and live in, and I think that's the fascination for me with Star Wars and others as well. We live in another parallel universe for a little bit of time, but all of a sudden the technologies now have converged in such a way that gap between what we are trying to do in our imagination and our story worlds and what we're physically able to do, that's blurred. It's become very, very, very narrow.
But it's interesting, you say that some of these technologies have come in from different bits of the creative sector or indeed outside. So I work with quite a lot of people who work in point cloud and do big scanning projects, and effectively, interestingly, they're all architects, all trained as architects, but those technologies came in from surveying, it's sort of not part of the creative industries at all. The game engine, real-time technologies did come in from the games industry, which was more separated from film than it was. But as you said, Ben, that and Declan, you've both cited individual projects that move the world on. So what are the ones that are highlights for you? Not necessarily ones you've done, although don't be modest. But what are the ones that you think, you looked at that and think, okay, that's somebody's gone into the toolbox and come out with something different that's moved things on?
For me, and I was indirectly involved. So
It's really interesting, the history of that. And we're working with bands like U2 who really want to use technology to kind of make their shows better. It was a case of how do we create a screen that could, be outside. No one had done that in the 90s. So then it's going back to our relationships with manufacturers and fabricators who can actually build something that everyone's dreaming about, and then using people like you two who have the money to put into it to test all these things, and they've always pushed the LED screen usage, haven't they? In the shows, and then the last show in the Sphere, they're the first band to play the Sphere,
which is again an interesting thing that you've got. Artists. I suppose the thing with artists is of that stature is they pay for most of the and so they can make creative decisions and creative risk, and to pull through a technology like LED screens is fascinating, because again, there's a lot of assumptions outside the creative sector that we're the recipients of technology, not impellers of technological advancement. So U2 and LED screens, Gravity, top that, Declan.
Actually, it's not coordinated in any way. We hadn't discussed this, but actually funny, I was going to pull on Gravity from a different perspective, because for me, Gravity is one of the seminal projects in this space around the Lightbox. So the Lightbox was built by a guy called Phil Geller. Phil Geller is former president of Lux Machina, a really seminal company in this space, in some respects almost the godfather of some of that pipeline and this what we call now virtual production or in-camera visual effects, so this idea of a volume. But of course, everything Ben has alluded to there is really challenging environment to try and shoot things. And so the natural iteration of that, and actually with him on that project around the robotics was a guy called Gary Marshall, who is now the vice president of virtual production at Nant Studios in Los Angeles as well. For me, that has a very personal connection, because that moment kind of solidified in my head a few people that I needed to work with and collaborate with. Glad to say that Phil Geller is the senior technical advisor at Studio Ulster, now my business in Belfast. And then Gary Marshall led the install of the technology because of the level of advancement. But what we're now saying to move on to a much more modest project, is an iteration and a maturity of this technology. So, the seminal work that we've seen right back as far as 5 or 6 years ago, where Mandalorian and other projects like that, and we've moved so far from that position that we stopped talking about virtual production necessarily because you don't see it anymore. And I think this is the critical piece, and not to say that wasn't, it didn't create a story world that was brilliant at the time, was seminal. But a lot of the work that ILM are doing now, you just don't see it. It's a tool. It's a part of the palette for the filmmakers and storytellers to move in to do new projects. But we recently completed a project for BBC Studios, and it was a docudrama series. All of a sudden, we have the opportunity for independent. It was a dramatic reconstruction of the Titanic, which of course for us is a strong interest in Belfast. Just to say it was great leaving us.
Never has a city made so much reputation out of a sink.
Well, it was just
sank.
It's fine leaving us. Just to be clear, we didn't think it. That project now, what we have is sub-millimeter tracking accuracy. We have an ability to really push now, building on everything that we've talked about today, into a world where it's becoming almost impossible, even physically standing in these environments, these sets now, to tell where we would call it the blue line, where the screen starts, where the real world ends, where the physical world starts, and the digital world starts. And so set extension work is becoming new. But for me, looking at these new processes, virtual production isn't a technology. These new processes are not technologies. They're a way of thinking about how we make film. They're a methodology. And that's the big challenge in a way. It is not for us to sort of retrain people who have 20 years of experience. It's for them to come and bring who they are and enable them to be able to do what they have always done brilliantly. And I think the technology in a way now needs to mature, and what we're building is a mature pipeline that allows it to get out of the way. We do the pedaling fast underneath, and the storytellers get on with building creative worlds. And so what we were seeing are things like dynamic sky. What does that mean? It means that it's not video, it's not pre-rendered, it's actually clouds we can change actively and at any second in that studio. For example, we were able to, funny enough, the Titanic sinks. I don't know if you knew that, but so when the water's flowing in around the boat, the camera operator was able to shuffle their shoulder and agitate the water, make the waves slightly more aggressive. And so there's this level now of creativity, but they were almost photorealistic in-camera visual effects. So we're now seeing set, performance, and almost post-production happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting space, pioneered by Ben and many others. But there's a maturity coming to this that is empowering stories. And ultimately, I always feel we're only really successful if you don't see us.
Yeah. So one of the other things, as you said, that those are all advancements that's still largely within studio. But I'm very interested in this, the breakout of these technologies. Obviously, Stu Fisher's work has always had them out in front of audiences. But it would be crazy to have the two of you who were so important in Aber Voyage on stage and not ask you about that. I know. I know you're NDA'd up to the eyeballs, but and the interesting thing is, obviously, both being London-based and other major collaborators on the show were also part of that community in London. Wayne McGregor Dance, whose studio is next to where I work, being one of them. What I'm interested in is not secrets about the show, but so the two of you and a choreographer like Wayne and motion capture artists and the artists themselves, how difficult was it to blend the creative practice? Because in the end, there's nothing like Aber Voyage had been done before.
No, but she's really nice and we're really nice. And no, we just...
Collaboration.
Yeah.
It was getting the right team of people in the right place at the right time.
But an architect, a dancer, and a filmmaker, not walk into I don't know, is it a joke?
And there were meetings like that because I mean, you all know if you're in a creative space, there might be a sort of standard format, and you all kind of know your space, and you know where they do that bit, and they're really good at that, and we do this bit, and we're really good at that. And there were meetings at the beginning where we were all gathered around the table going, "Is that their bit or is that our bit?" But that was fun. It was managed really well because the ultimate client were ABBA, and they were just unbelievably good people and very supportive of it. So they took all the sort of political wranglings out of it. And they also knew they wanted something really good. They didn't want something on the cheap. And I'm not saying we didn't work hard to make it for the price. We all worked incredibly hard to make it for the price, but they said they trusted us, and for me that was amazing to have that sort of freedom to work together.
I think for us it was a new experience working with a company like ILM, having that. I think with show design, normally you have your lighting designer and your video designer, and you're kind of working together, but not to the extent that we had to with ABBA, because like Declan was saying, there's no boundary between set and screen and building. So we were constantly having to work out what this was and how we could kind of trick everybody to not understand what was happening.
I think the other thing, quite often when we do films, historically, before what Declan's describing, which is the in-camera stuff, you often start the film and maybe you're not quite ready, and there are things that you haven't finished designing or working out, and you just kind of go, yeah, stick a green screen up, boom, we'll sort it out later. And you've got another year to deal with it. The wonderful thing about these shows and the abilities that we can do now is you can actually capture the moment and have that moment with the audience or with the cast, and it's in real time and it's happening there. And I think the big thing that does, though, is it takes post-production and it sticks it into pre-production, because you have to answer all the questions. You do a concert, you can't sort of have an idea halfway through the concert and go, oh, that's a shame we didn't do that. You plan the whole thing out, and that very much on Aber Voyage, we were hit by the pandemic, and we thought COVID was going to stop all live performances. In fact, all the financiers sat there and said, actually, this is the worst investment I've ever made. The world is never going to come back in great numbers to experience things. But what it actually gave us was about a year and a half to refactor a lot of our ideas, our approaches, our designs, and actually made a better project because of it. We had to scale down dramatically and just went on a shoestring with just the sort of think tanks, certainly on our side of it. I'm not sure about yours so much.
We got planning permission just before lockdown, so we secured that, but then there was COVID, Brexit, timber shortages, the blockage in the Panama, the canal.
The
Suez Canal.
created by Greensill, yes, the ship.
Half of the arena was in the Suez Canal, stuck sideways.
Yeah, it was tricky. And there's a point in a show where you have to decide this is it. Like, we're going to open, we're going to start selling tickets. So I think 6 months before, there's a call saying we're going to go live with tickets, and that building has to be finished and the show's got to be ready. So
it's from that I was touching on there. What I'm seeing now in film is not only is the technology converging, but the departments are converging. So we're seeing the art department much more involved. We're seeing it is, to Ben's point, you don't necessarily resolve this later. You've got to come into a lot of these where you're working in real time. You've got to come into this much earlier in some respects, not as early as people think. We're getting to a point where we're refining the technology piece, but the collaboration has changed, in my view, in a very positive way, where in the past, a lot of things were very siloed, not by their choice necessarily, but just by the kind of hierarchy that sits around film production, where VFX are here, art department's here, designs over here. There's a kind of a split now to get a lot of that resolved early doors rather than kind of in post or post production. It's happening much earlier, and I actually think there's it's much more creative process, much more collaborative process, and we're building stronger teams and approach to the projects, that certainly the ones that we're involved in over the next year. I see a change in how they are coming at films. They don't change their skill set. They're just collaborating better. The communication has changed because it has to. And in some respects, these new technologies are enabling that. And I think it also lends itself then into application for other sectors. Live being a brilliant example. And we can see that from our perspective as well, even just the immersive experience and how we think about animation. So, for us, even thinking about animation, you would think, well, what has a studio like ours got to do with animation? But we can create environments for animators to come in and shoot their animation in real time using Steadicams and cranes, and in a way that is transformational. We can create environments. We can immerse filmmakers in environments for weeks on end and allow them to walk around sets and walk around locations that are coming from the artists and the storyboards. And we're using DOPs to even light those sets, but digitally. And then we're filming avatars in locations. The Lion King, Jon Favreau's The Lion King did this. I don't know if Ben was involved in any of that, but they did that where they filmed a live animation. Yes, it's not quite final pixel. You push into the last stage of that around the avatars and so on. But this is assets now that are built that can be used. And so many of the clients that are coming to us in the next year or so are like games companies. And so games companies now are monetizing their IP around some very large companies who have multi-billion-dollar franchises around games. They want to now create linear content, but also they want to create immersive experiences. Some of their games are built in engines that we use for in-camera visual effects, like Unreal Engine. That enables them to be able to bring those assets into these environments. And so we're seeing this interplay. This term transmedia is coming back. This is something. Well, it is. It's coming back. We're hearing American clients and a lot of people nationally, internationally starting to talk about being able to build lots of different things from singular assets. And that has been very much kind of a noble idea. But now we're seeing this interoperability where we're able to start to repurpose assets for live, for film, for games, for immersive, and they're very similar assets.
So we've got a kind of convergent, a toolkit, technological toolkit that's expanded. We've got some kind of convergence for practice and careers as well. We see people working in film and working in live, working theatre, maybe working games, in a way that perhaps is new. And we've got this breakout from linear to experiential and maybe metaverse environments, persistent online environments and things. So I just want to return to Abervoyge to ask one question, which is not about the show, but it was a 3-year party anniversary this week. So the show's run for 3 years. It's fantastically successful. The creative industries would normally respond to that by spawning imitators. Why hasn't that happened?
Because it's really hard. No,
the first time
is a $100 million question.
It's kind of impossibly hard the first time, But the takeaway you would have thought, is it something about the creative loop that ABBA were involved in, that they're still alive rather than?
I think something will happen. I don't think, one thing I want to say is I don't think it should ever replace live concerts, because I absolutely love them. It's just another form of entertainment. And but a lot of people are interested in thinking about it. I think actually one of the hardest things is finding the right location to do it, and whether you build a building for it like ABBA did.
But ABBA, obviously, to get it to work, we couldn't just go into an existing space. It would never work. We had to design the space around the show. It's not to say that it will never work in the future, because I think as screen technologies change and get better, it's going to be easier to do it. But it's space in cities, and finding the right locations within a city that you can get people to. And a lot of these sites are outside of a city where it's not on the tourist trail, and it was a bit of a leap of faith to even go to East London, which it's not that far from the centre of London, but it's drawing people out of cities and being confident you can get those audiences, I suppose.
I think the other thing is to the investment creatively and financially to make something that's really satisfying, not just kind of there are only a few acts in the history of music, for example, that have got that global stature. And something where an investor will say, okay, yes, it can start in this city, but then it can travel over there and it can travel over there. And I think it's finding those performers, those musicians, those whatever, who have that global impact and resonate across generations as well. It's not very often you go to a cinema and you see sort of 5-year-old kids having a great time with their 80-year-old parents, but grandparents. But at ABBA Voyage, you see that every day of the week, and so it's something about being able to entertain all generations at the same time. Is a big thing as well. So, and we had no idea it was going to work. I mean, I remember sitting there before it opened, and we were playing many times, just rehearsing. We only got the arena 6 or 8 weeks before it opened. And we didn't know whether it was kind of all a bit scary. And I just went, is this going to work? And we went, yeah, no, of course it is. And it was actually the old rock and roll roadie type lighting guys who just went, it's fine. Get 3,000 people in here. They're going to go bananas. And they did.
And I would say to anybody who gets the chance to see the show in London, I've seen it 3 times, is they do go bananas. And one of the most interesting things that I find about the show is that if you look forwards, you can, you lock on, you can convince yourself they're not there. And
before you go in.
It's not actually like that. But if you turn round, if you're in the arena and you turn around and look at the audience, they are definitely acting like a live show audience. They are not looking like a
It's
movie
very
audience.
weird watching people cheering and clapping. Yeah. What is a screen? Basically.
Yeah.
It's a really cool screen, but it's a screen.
Yeah. I could ask you questions which you wouldn't answer for hours about ABBA Voyage. With the current state of the art, what are the things? I had a go at getting you to list the things that Seven Line getting us to here. What are the things that you see at the moment that have gone live that represent kind of new steps forward?
Well, we've done, in fact, both of us have done work in the Sphere, and that's quite interesting. I mean, it's huge, and it's you have to experience it to go. You can't really describe it. You just have to go and do it.
So this is the project probably everybody knows. The Sphere in Las Vegas. You probably know the dimensions of it, but
yeah,
bloody enormous. I think
bloody enormous. I don't know. I mean, I think. I mean, a lot of people are now saying, "Can you make it more intimate?" And actually, that's infinitely harder to bring that humanity and proximity of people, even at this distance, to actually create something that people feel is a tactile experience is intensely hard. There is a sort of sweet spot to the scale of audience, 3,000 people, or when you get up to 18,000 people. Well, how many was it, Adele?
80.
Yeah. I mean, that's a different world. You've got a few people in the front row, but basically nobody can see the performer anyway. They're that big. and then it's all about.
But you have the Guinness World Record officially size screen. So
no, I think for me and for at ILM, we're looking at the next screens that are not just finer pitch, but they actually, if you imagine turning every pixel on the screen into a small HD projector and creating a light field, you will be able to give people an experience that is a window into a three-dimensional space without glasses or anything. And it's orders of magnitude harder for us to generate the data for it, and it's orders of magnitude harder to build it. But fundamentally, that to me will be all the real-time graphics and the building and everything is great, but actually you're still looking at a flat screen. And we want to be able to create a screen that people just look through, and as you move your head, if you're on the
communal side, 3D without headsets.
Yeah, every single person will.
It makes it a singular experience, even if you are stood with a group of people. Even if you're wearing glasses, it feels like you're not sharing it with people, and I think that's the most important thing.
And there's glasses that you can wear at Avatar, and that's great.
Yep.
But what I'm talking about is if you're at a Coldplay concert and you're on the left, you'll be looking at the right-hand side of Chris Martin's face, and you know spatially where you are. And as you walk around, you'll see not only stereo depth, you'll see full perspective as well. And it'll mean in the volumes, you don't have to track the camera anymore because everybody in the volume will see full perspective wherever they look.
And how far away is?
I just need somebody with an awful lot of money to help. We've already prototyped it, and it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a roadmap for where we're going. I think that I would absolutely agree with that. And I think, even in volumes and so on, there are so many things we can do. It's virtually limitless in terms of, creating the Mugabe Desert in the middle of Belfast, for the next 12 weeks and shooting a Magic Hour. That's all brilliant. But it's very much reliant on parallax is the effect that we're kind of talking about here in the context of being able to see around corners and so on. That is changing. That will change. I don't imagine us ever buying LED in the way that we have it right now. In the very first instance, we would want a fourth LED. RGB isn't enough. We should be RGBW, where we have a white, where we can recreate better colors. We will always need light. Light's a really critical piece in this for DOPs. That physical replication of light is something that is very challenging even to generative AI necessarily to make it convincing. We're probably a few years away from that, but the exponential growth as demonstrated by Guy and others today in these spaces are really interesting to us. We have in the middle of Studio Ulster in Belfast is a Kotor network that, of course, you're very familiar with and having been involved in leading some of it. The Kotor network is enabling us to look at new technologies that will bring us to where Ben's describing there and trying to look at that pathway. I think there's milestones on that road yet that we haven't hit because ultimately it comes down to two things. One is we work in a very highly creative and innovative sector, but the investment in this sector is highly conventional and needs confidence. So they've done a thing for 10 years a certain way. Why would they change the formula if it's always delivered good results? And so getting that adoption curve right and that moment of adoption is a critical piece. You do need, early adopters. You do need innovators that build seminal pieces like Avatar and so on, and looking at how Baba Voyage and so on. But if you can get to a point where you can start to hit those milestones quickly, I think for us, looking at tools like generative AI is not a bit scary. It's actually very welcome because it'll bring us to a place where we'll be able to build what are truly photorealistic assets in these worlds. And then, as Ben suggests, not having to rely on lots and lots of complex tracking and alignment and so on. No matter where you stand in these environments, you will actually see. It's that Star Trek thing about this environment where you just say computer on and the whole thing just actually becomes quite the holodeck. Yeah. And so, essentially where we're getting to is a holodeck that actually happens in the real world. And that will allow us to build anywhere very, very quickly. Interplay between the physical and the digital is critical, and how that works is down to human. And I go back to what I said earlier on this morning. This is about people understanding how all of this works and using it as a palette to color, light and to color our stories and our story worlds. The world builds still require us to come in and unlock those things, but that technology now is bringing closer what's in our imagination versus how we can execute. And I think what's really exciting about that is we will have to reimagine how some of these roles play and the jobs that are in this sector, how those two things intersect, but that's the trajectory. There's unquestionable.
So there's lots of things in there. And one of them, but only one of them, is the impact of AI on creative practice. Because I'm never quite sure, to extend Ben's toolbox metaphor, whether it's right to think of AI as a tool in itself, or a kind of like an advancement on all the other tools. So I think a lot of people, having seen Guy's brilliant presentation, some people will have taken away from that AI is a form of automation, of a form of replication of what a lot of the humanity in creative practice would have taken a very different message from you saying it's all about people. What is the impact, do you think, in your creative practices of AI, and does it still act in the way you've described these other creative technologies as a tool for the creatives? Because I'm just wondering if the investors see it the same way.
I think we have to see it as a tool that's going to help us, like not replace us, but like let's get more efficient. There's efficiencies that can be made by using AI in our day-to-day work. I think it's very for Stufish, it's quite an early thing. We're trying to understand, and I suppose our biggest problem is clients coming to us with a image they've created saying we want this, and it's like
yeah, I can imagine.
And then we have to work out physically how you can get to that, which seems a bit backwards. So it's going to take a bit of time to kind of settle. And but I read something about it's never going to replace architects or designers, because clients never know what they want anyway. So until they know what they want, we're never going to have to. Yeah.
That's a very positive outlook. Clients will always be clients.
It always change their mind. Yeah.
Ben, do you see? Is it?
We have to lean into it. There's no point in hiding from it.
Yeah.
And I see it in two. It's multifaceted, but I see there's optimizations to things that we've been doing for years and years and years, and that's training, and that's being able to infer things, and that's being able to save compute time, artist time, whatever you want to call it. And then there's the full sort of generative. Hey, I'm just prompting something through whatever prompt technique you've got. Make me pictures. And I think there's going to be an incredible, guys proved there's an enormous market for that out there, TikTok and such like, where you're sustaining at the moment only, I don't even use TikTok. How is it, 10 seconds or something? Anyway, if you can entertain somebody for 10 seconds on TikTok using AI, you've got 1 billion people viewing it and you're a superstar. I still think the structure of a 2-hour theatre show, structure of a 2-hour TV film or a film, there's an awful lot of humanity that goes into that, and there's an awful lot of experts that come together to create that. And it's not to say that there won't be singular artists who will use AI in a beautiful and amazing way, just like an oil painter would paint paintings in a very unique, personal way. But I think there is something just amazing, not only about the experience of watching a theatre show or going to a cinema or going to a concert, but it's also knowing that there's hundreds of people who have contributed to that. And they were on their A game. It's like when you put a film crew together, every person is there who have spent years specializing in their craft or their technology or their talents to bring it to camera just for that moment where the camera rolls. And I think there's an awful lot of magic that works there that will be assisted by AI, but I don't think it will be entirely replaced by it. I just don't think it will.
I would agree with that. I think there's actually new evidence and certainly new research that's suggesting that, that I would use this word materiality, the actual contact that you have with the physical world, the real world, is becoming increasingly important to younger generations. There's a whole generation of audience that are coming through that don't want to look at artificial only. They're quite comfortable with, and really do want to see the human hand, whether that's a human hand in the story, human hand in the design, human hand in the delivery. But they are absolutely, make no mistake, not happy to embrace technologies to automate some of those processes. And the work that we do, we have a combination of things like in-camera visual effects, but also scanning, 3D and 4D volumetric scanning and motion capture data. That's point cloud data. That's, a lot of that is really noisy. It isn't usable straight away. You've got to do an awful lot of work with that, and that is work that nobody wants to do. It's quite benign work and cleanup and so on, and we can teach small language models, not large language models, how to do that very, very accurately. And that cleans that up and speeds that up, and so it allows us to actually be much more productive. So productivity is increased by using these tools. But right now, a lot of generative AI, a lot of people get very preoccupied by it. It is brilliant. There are reasons you'd want to use it. Pre-visualization is a brilliant reason to use it. But for us, like in the world that I work in, when we are creating environments, we need to be able to unpick every pixel, every detail, every aspect of that. Right now, generative AI is a bit like stereo when it came on, in the late 70s, whatever it was, where you had the piano over here and the drum kit over here.
Yeah.
It's slightly, look at this, isn't this brilliant? And that's not to diminish the progress that's been made week in, week out, and we can see some of that evidence today as well. It's incredible. But for me, I need to be able to unpick every pixel of every object, of every blade of grass, of every block, every stone that's in the world builds that we have. That it can't do that right now, but it's getting there.
It's interesting that I think that you three who are all at the cutting edge of this stuff are very positive, because you're all dealing with massive amounts of data where AI can take away a lot of the grunt work and make you more productive and be used in the workplace. I do wonder whether there's a possibility we end up with a kind of dual track impact of AI. I think Milivoje earlier on said he got this concern that it takes 8 years to develop an artist. The first 5 years they're not so good, and they're not as good as AI. And I wonder. I've got my daughter's a talent agent and dealing mainly with models, and all of the low-level model work they fear could be taken out by generative AI in a couple of years. And leaving the high-end real kind of people. But let's end on a more positive note. I think you three are very, very positive about it, so that's really great. Right, so very quick fire closer. Imagine 5 years from now, I'm not going to ask you what you will have done in 5 years, which will no doubt be amazing. But what would the thing that this trajectory would enable that you would like to see? What's the show you'd like to see? Not necessarily one you make yourself. That would build all these things together and wouldn't be possible at the moment. Oh, that's it's obviously not a good question.
Well, I kind of like the idea of and we need to be careful about rights and artist rights here before I start a row, but I kind of like the idea of having a Spotify that's essentially a holodeck of live concerts, so that you can kind of relive those moments where, to Ben's point, I love going to live music. I would never want to stop that, as somebody who's passionate about music. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to step back into that concert for a little bit, just to remember that and be there? And so, that's a combination of all of the technologies we've just talked about there now. We first of all have to create these incredible, memorable experiences, but to relive them, being able to maybe pull up your favorite artist and be able to step back into that live environment, that arena where they're performing or singing, and feel like you're actually there, be able to walk around it. That would be, I think that's a trajectory that we're heading in. That's
a bloody good answer, isn't it? Because it's completely impossible at the moment, but we can all imagine what it would be like. Who'd like that? Ben, you look ready.
No. I'm buying that one. The one thing I will say is, I didn't ever intend to work in music, and I've always loved music, and I was a failed bass player, and my brother was a drummer, so all of that was cool. But
there are no failed bass players, Ben.
No, 4 strings and all that. No, but there is something really emotional about working on a musical project. Film projects are incredible, and when you get to work on the really big ones, it's really exciting and everything. But people get really strongly opinionated about music. And it's like, you sort of, who would you like to do next? And you'll say some name, and then, oh, God, I wouldn't go and see that. And so for me, it's just been really funny, the passion that gets poured into it, because you may have grown up with some music and it's dear to your heart and your emotions and your life is intertwined with that. Seems really, really different than there are still film aficionados and buffs who love film in that way. But I think people get a lot closer to music, funnily enough. And so I'll buy that for $1.
Yeah. Keep making audiences as joyful as they are when they come out of ABBA. My favorite thing is to stand outside at the end and just watch people come out, and they're so happy. And that's, as long as we're making people happy, I think that's
And I think the other thing, to be able to work with the musical artists themselves is a huge bonus. So you're not just going back to a period where you're doing archaeology, you're actually working. And I think that was the joy of ABBA. They were all still there, and they'd come in, and we'd meet them, and they'd have opinions, and they'd remember things and tell you moments, and you're just going, oh my God, you're present. It's absolutely here. And I think that authenticity is part of what makes the show work for people. They know that ABBA were involved in it. This isn't some sort of money-spinning resurrection. They are there.
So that to conclude on is a really, really interesting point. There are three creatives at the cutting edge of implementing these technologies actually believe they can make things more authentic than what we talk about, which is virtualization. So I'd just like to say thank you to Declan, to Ben, and to Alicia for a remarkable kind of insight into the applications of these technologies and a remarkably positive view on it, as you'd expect. Thank you.
That takes us to the end of the day. I have been given the task of trying to wrap up, which is almost impossible. But I have a few thoughts, and I just wanted to maybe cover some kind of key reflections that I've had. So bear with me. I think we've been on a real journey today through the creative economy in the UK, in the Western Balkans, and wider Europe. We've heard case studies in the policy space of vision to action, of the importance of data, and that we've heard that policy is best when it's participatory, practical, and shaped from the ground up. We moved to entrepreneurship and innovation, and we heard great examples of businesses, incubators, skills academies, cruise services. But whether it's in Yerevan or whether it's in Yorkshire, and whether you're an educator or an employer or an intermediary, people and creative talent are key. And fair work and sustainable growth is critical. And then we talked about place, and we heard from festivals, and we heard from cultural spaces, from Prizren to Manchester, those who are building narratives from the past through to the present and into the future. And we heard about collective placemaking in Dundee, resilient placemaking in Vinica. I think that will stick with us all for a long time. And at the intersection of place and technology, Deepa's story from Belfast managed to move us kind of ironically or very aptly when she was delivering it digitally, actually. And then we wrapped up looking at technology, and we ended up with some mind-blowing generative AI, some world record-breaking tech, and looked at the future of live performance. And I love that phrase that technology is an evolution. And when we first set out to designing this forum, we used a bit of this phrase, and I just think I'll end with this, that Growth Reimagined invites us all to think about how economies develop in new ways and to explore models that prioritize local value and long-term approaches to prosperity and well-being. So I'll leave it there, but we have a brilliant day ahead tomorrow. So please do stick with us, sign up, and enjoy the rest of the time getting to know each other. That bit is absolutely critical. I have a few thanks to add before we close. I just want to get my list to make sure I thank everybody. So I want to thank everybody who's here, the audience, and all the speakers. I wanted to thank the SIM team, Christina, Bane, Dubrovka, and anybody else who I haven't named but who are volunteering today as well. The Beyond team, Tara, Holly, Eliza, and Sam. The British Council team, Jovana, Milan, Jelena, Sedan, Jansu, who's not here but was critical to shaping the whole program, and to many other British Council colleagues working behind the scenes. Yeah, it's been a real group effort to get us here to this forum, and as you can imagine, a lot of logistics involved. So just huge thanks to all of the team for working together. And we have a hard close, so I know we need to move. Yeah, thank you all. And yeah, enjoy the evening ahead in Kotor. And we'll see as many of you as possible tomorrow. Thanks.